hello, everyone. Welcome back to Just Talking Business. I am Stephanie Van Bark, and I'm a small business owner. Today's guest actually is in an industry that is near and dear to my heart, primarily because she and I sort of do somewhat of the same thing. Melissa Hunter Davis, she is a publisher. I won't tell you all of her story. I'll let her do that. Let's welcome her aboard. Hi, Melissa.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Thank you for having
You are from Sugarcane Magazine, a publisher. I'll open up by letting you share with us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what Sugarcane is all about.
Yes, absolutely. So, like you mentioned, I'm Melissa Hunter Davis from Sugarcane Magazine, and Sugarcane is a digital and print publication dedicated to global Black art and culture. So we talk about everything about the arts, music, dance, visual arts. Even though we're very visual arts heavy, we talk about all areas of the arts. And I was inspired to do this a few years ago. I was working in the arts. So my background is in theater, and I've worked as an arts administrator. Gosh, like this is 2022 for over 20 years. And that's what I've done. Arts administration, producing, working in theater. That's really what my love is. And I was working at a cultural organization, and they gave me a job to put together a season for this particular center. And I wanted to do something spectacular. I wanted to do really good work. And when I was going online to research, like some of the groups that maybe I didn't have access to, I thought it was really weird that there was just like no one place that I could go to learn about different artists or different actors or different plays. And I was like, just thought it was odd. There was things, of course, from music, but outside of that, I didn't find anything that was arts focused. And I decided to change that. And that's where Sugarcane came from.
That actually was one of my questions, why art? So now that's good to know. But you've been in business from what I can tell, 20 years. So clearly there was a need for that particular program. And, just in general, a small business being in business for 20 years is a big deal. Talk to us a little bit about, what you've gone through, I guess, over those 20 years, as how you may have had to evolve, but still being able to drive your passion.
This has been one of the most challenging exercises.
And she's a mother, by the way.
One of the most challenging exercises in making your dreams come true that I've ever embarked on. But so I've done a lot. When we started, initially I wanted this to be a magazine. I was like, oh yes, this would be a magazine. But it wasn't in 2008, which is when the economy like really, really crashed. Before then, excuse me. And it was even before I had my daughter. So this was 2004. But right about 2004, 2005 is when the rumblings of the economy crashing started, like the very small kind of trickles, like, this ain't really working out. And a lot of publishers had to go digital, and they could no longer print because advertising dollars were starting to dry up.
Right.
So that was the first thing. And I was like, I would hate to start this and then can't continue this because I don't know how to raise money and I don't know how to sell advertising.
Right.
So I decided to just go ahead and make this a website. So that's what I worked on, and we debuted in 2006.
Okay.
But I don't know how to sell advertising, and I don't know how to fund this. At the time, there were no conversations about funding an arts magazine. Right. Arts organizations, yes, but I wasn't an arts organization. I wasn't a 501c3. Right. So I kind of didn't really know what to do. And so we kind of went dormant for a while.
Okay.
And right around 2011, I started to figure this out, like, okay, maybe you just need to kind of do this on your own for a while until you figure everything out. So I just kind of started like placing stories and then getting small interviews. But by maybe 2014, and this is a personal story. So my mother dies in 2014. About a year or so before that, my mother and I get into an argument. Stupid, dumb argument, but doesn't matter. We get into this argument and we stop speaking to each other. And one thing that you never do with Melissa, don't ever tell me you're not talking to me, because I will never talk to you for life.
Whoa.
I won't call you. I won't text you. Don't carry a pigeon. No mail.
Say don't carry a pigeon.
You would never hear from me. And so I was like, okay, you call me when you want to call. And she called, and I didn't answer the phone.
Aww.
Well, she wasn't there yet, so it was okay. So she left this message, and she said, in another side note, my mother was she was a very strong woman. She was very opinionated. She would tell you if you sucked. She didn't care who you were.
Right.
She might have been nicer to like outside people, but with me, she kept it all the way real.
Right, 100.
All the
You loved
time.
it and you hated it.
It was bad or bad. She called me and she said, I visited your website. She said, Melissa, it's beautiful. I love what you're doing. Carol Hunter has never said anything like this. I mean, to get something like that from her, you couldn't pay her.
Right.
But honest to say something like that. And that was really meaningful to me. Okay. Fast forward, she passes away, and I started to like make some changes, like smaller changes. And I started to kind of come out more. And I took some of my husband's advice. He said, Melissa, I know that you're trying to do an international magazine. He said, but you have artists here. Why don't you talk to them? And I was like, let's see how this all works. Mm-hmm. And as I started to change things, and I think we got out a little bit more, and I felt like I picked up traction. I was like, maybe this will work. But I was still going to shut this down because I wasn't getting the response. Interesting. I wasn't getting the response locally that I expected.
That you expected.
Until I got a chance to go to a luncheon during Art Basel. And I was like running around that day, but I showed up to this luncheon because I knew the person who was doing this event. So I just kind of went in and sat down. I didn't know anybody there, but I just kind of sat down and got on my phone. And this guy was sitting next to me, and he was like really nosy. And he just turned to me and was like, hi, what's your name? I'm so-and-so. And I started to speak to him, and he said, what do you do? And I told him, and he was like, oh my God. So he pulls out all this paper from his bag. Like we got 1 million tote bags from going to Art Basel, right? Right. So he pulls out all this paper, and he was like, look, this is you. He took my guide to Black Art, copied, printed. It's different when you print from like a website because 50 million pages. He printed every page and circled everything that he wanted to go to. Let's get around. And so we talked, and I was like, what? He wasn't from here. He was from DC.
Oh, awesome.
He was from DC. He was an art collector. He was like, I'm a collector. A lot of museums tend to borrow my work when they do shows. And I was like, oh, this is wonderful. And that it was what told me you're going to study and keep it going, because that means that you are speaking effectively to people that you want to talk to, and you got it.
And people are paying attention to you that you weren't even aware that was paying attention.
Yeah.
And I think that's the motivation that all of us need sort of in that space, that you need to be able to connect with your audience. And are you able to do so on a regular basis in what you do as a publisher? Or are you sort of so kind of removed from it and kind of working in this esoteric space?
So I was definitely like living behind a screen. Mm-hmm. And so there's no faces, there's no names, but also I'm not getting feedback. But one of the things about, especially the time that we live in now, you just have to constantly ask for what you want. So if you want them to respond to you, you have to talk to them and ask them to respond to you.
Right.
And that was something that I didn't know at the time. And even now, I meet people who will say, oh, I don't brag about what I do. I'll walk into a room. It doesn't matter where I'm at. I'll just walk into a room, and if you don't ask me who I am or what I do, I don't offer it unless I have to.
Right.
So it's always in one of those moments where they stop and go, wait, what? Oh, you're Melissa. So that's when all of this kind of happens. So I didn't get a chance to really speak to these people, because you do live behind a screen when you're doing this, unless you're doing events, which I don't do a lot of.
Right.
Not at this time. And I think maybe this year will be the first time that we kind of slowly start getting back into events.
So are you do you contract out services, or do you have a staff?
Both. Okay. So I contract out services, but I call them my staff. So legally they're not, right?
I know, exactly.
Legally they're not, but these are also people who a lot of them have worked with me for a long time. My editor, I can't tell you when I started using him because I don't remember. Right. He's been around for a long time. One of my best writers was one of those women who called me who said, "I've been reading for you for years. Can I write for you?"
Okay.
And she's been with me for a long time. Um, my daughter,
Okay.
she's my unpaid staffer. She's my unpaid staffer.
Look, labor laws.
I know, but
But I do feed her.
you know, she get a little sick every now and then. She get a little sick every now and then. She's been on sabbatical. This is her senior year. She just graduated, and then she just got caught up in the panoramic. So she's been dealing with that this week. But even after that, she helps me as well. So I have people who help me, and even though they're contracted, I consider people more like a family. I lean on them heavy for everything that I do.
And do you write as well?
I try not to, but I do.
Yeah.
I do.
That's the plight of a small business owner.
Yeah, I try not to, and it's only because I would prefer a particular standard with the work that I do. I'm not saying that I'm a terrible writer, but I was just one of my writers, Angela. Angela's phenomenal, and if she can just do it, we're good.
Right.
But every once in a while, if something is really quick that has to be done, and I don't have time to get to anybody, I'll just do it.
Okay. So Melissa and I are in an organization called Black Owned Media Alliance. It's called BOMA. We call it BOMA. I want to start with, I kind of stepped in it the other day. I don't know if you were on the meeting with us when I talked about, sort of there's this mantra out there that print publication is dead. I don't think that was received very well by everyone. so I had to backtrack. But I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, obviously print publication is very expensive. But there is still an audience of folks that really likes paper, print.
Mm-hmm.
What is your feeling on that shift and how those in the publishing world are going to have to adjust accordingly?
So I agree and I disagree. First of all, I'm one of those people who likes paper. My bookshelf behind me. I don't like reading. I don't like reading online.
I agree.
It just bothers my eyes to sit here like crap. I'm like, I can't do this all night. So I don't like reading online. I like having a magazine. I like having paper. I like the way it feels.
Right.
There we go. I like the way it feels. But you're right. I think that because we have a lot of access to information now, it's just easy for people to read on their phones or to read something or to read a headline, which is what we really do, which is we read a headline and not necessarily read an entire publication. And to be honest with you, when you're taught to read as an adult, and not that taught to read, but I remember reading a newspaper. I think I remember being told that people really only read the headline and maybe the first 2 or 3 paragraphs. Like you got to cram all that important information in that first because they're not going to read the rest of it.
I'm guilty of that. I peruse through.
Right. So that's not something that's unusual. That's something that people do. Excuse me. It's something that people do. It's not unusual. So I think that's where we are. We have such quick access to information. There's almost no need to pick up magazines the way we used to. But there are still people who like magazines, and it's a cult following almost because there's certain things that you just can't get online. Certain things don't translate well.
Right.
Really. If you really like, there's certain, literary magazines.
Right.
You're better reading that at the beach with a book in your hand. Honestly, for an art magazine, it's great to see those images online, but it's actually better to have that magazine in front of you to be able to look through it and take time with the art and really look at it. And if you did what I did as a kid, I used to get the art out and put it on my wall. Everything from, rap magazines like Word Up to my mother's old art books.
Right.
So that was something that you can't do that online. So I think that there's still a world for print. I think things have changed. I just also think you have to make print. You have to make it work for you. And if you can make it work for you as a business and you can give what the audience what they want, you can pull it off. You may need to change your distribution. You may need to drop your price. You may need to drop your page count. But I think it's still possible.
So about possible. So I noticed on your website there is a subscription. You can subscribe to your newsletter online. How are you pricing? And you don't necessarily have to give exact prices, but how are you looking at pricing your print publication?
That is something that is very difficult for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I priced it. I thought about how a lot of magazines price theirs. So, like, I think you can get Vogue. Well, Vogue has changed from 12 months to 6, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that because it changed in the middle of my subscription.
Okay.
Because I kept getting the magazine a couple of years later, like, why are you still sending me this? Like, this expired months ago. Was because they changed the amount of time that they print, so they gave us an extra.
Okay.
So I think about, how do I make this work as a small business, because I don't get the same volume discount that maybe a Vogue gets.
Mm-hmm.
So I just tried to make it attractive, and on par with, other magazines that are actually larger. But just to get this out, just to be able to get into the game.
Okay.
I really haven't figured out that pricing yet, but at least if I can get in, I'm open to making those changes as need be. But I also don't want to make it so high that it doesn't make sense.
Absolutely.
Doing print is expensive,
Mm-hmm.
but I just can't charge you $75. I know you can pay for that.
It's gonna have to.
Yeah. So I just, had to realize, even if I have to eat this, because I know that it just covers postage.
Mm-hmm.
And for right now, that's what we want to do, which I think I'm saying competitors, but we're not really competing. But if you look at other magazines, they're doing the same thing. The subscription, it simply pays for postage. It's a way to have them distribute because they make their money from advertising.
Right.
The most hands, they'll make that money back.
Okay. So you and I know another publisher who I interviewed on this show as well, who struggled through. He said that he actually felt more of an impact with the 2008 housing bust than he did with the pandemic. That actually was a learning experience for him. And now we're here in the middle of the pandemic. Was that the same situation for you? And under both circumstances, I think you said with the housing bust, you just decided to sit on it for a while. What was your did you learn some hard and fast lessons, and what was your shift during the pandemic?
I learned a lot. Not only doing business, but who I worked with and who I did business with. I really had to make some changes, and I had to do some pivots as well, because I work in a field where my advertisers do events, they put on exhibitions, they do physical things, and all of a sudden we can't go anywhere. There's no events, there's nothing else to do. So they're all scrambling as well. So that changed a lot for me.
Mm-hmm.
I did go digital in a different way. I started off doing something just to, in my mind, was to keep people busy. And I was thinking, what do we do on Saturdays? I said, on Saturdays, we go to art talks. We go and we talk to, artists and curators and thought leaders. That's what we were doing on the weekends. So I started doing a series of art talks on Instagram. That did really, really well. Even got the attention of Instagram. They promoted some of the work that we did. So that was really interesting. So I learned a lot about diversifying my audience. And I also found that audience. So go back to that story that I told you, the guy from how I met him randomly. So in joining some of the social media platforms, we would have these talks, and I would start meeting people who never put name to face, even people that we'd interviewed, that maybe somebody else wrote about, but I made a point to never put Melissa out front.
Mm-hmm.
Always a brand. I'm like, don't pay attention to me. I don't matter. Go look at this. But that gave them a chance to see, oh, that's the girl behind the curtain.
Right.
We didn't know that you were. And so they would tell me all these stories about, the importance of this. And it gave me other opportunities. We're now a part of the Smithsonian now. It's like a really, really big deal. And that pandemic really forced me to pivot and got me out of my comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And really opened up things for me. It didn't always translate financially, which was the problem for me. You know,
Why am I not making money as a result of this?
you loved it so much, I need to keep this going. But it at least opened me up to realize that that audience there was really hungry, and I had to use that hunger to leverage what I needed to make money. Now things have changed a lot. Um, and I'm happy with the changes that I've made. I feel like I've gotten out of the worst, and I do see a light at the end of the tunnel, even though we are smack dab in another recession.
Right, right.
Um, but I do see the light at the end of the tunnel because I've now that I know that audience and what they look like and what they're going through at this time, I can
Right.
maneuver well. So I did. I learned a whole heck of a lot.
So do you feel like also this, unfortunately during the pandemic, the mantra, the fake news started to become a thing.
Mhm.
Um, you know, do you think that has had impact on what you do in the publishing world in its totality? Or as it like you force people to sort of pivot how they're putting information out and ergo, seeing light at the end of the tunnel of, publishing sort of remaining that staple when it comes to sharing information?
Sugarcane is a very niche site,
Hmm.
and we deal in facts. And we also deal in thought and opinion.
Hmm.
We're talking about art. We're not necessarily talking about politics. There are some political issues that we need to tackle, like for example, when we talk about maybe artifacts and stolen artifacts from the African continent.
Hmm.
That kind of becomes a little political, maybe sometimes. We did cover at least one controversy that happened during 2020. But for
Hmm.
the most part, we're not talking about that. And I speak to an audience who researches a lot. So we're talking to people who buy art, either for themselves, for corporations, for institutions. We talk to curators who need to be able to pull information. So for them, it's not fake news. They know that it's based in research and fact.
Hmm.
So we're lucky that we don't have that problem.
Okay.
What it does put me in line for, and I think this came up in a conversation that we had in BOMA, it does sometimes put me at the bullseye for racist trolls.
Yes.
We're having these conversations about, oh, you're just talking about Black people. This is just about Black. What are you about? That's when all of this can blow up.
Right.
So, and I honestly just have to push things to the side and just move them along with it.
Okay.
Um, that's probably the only thing that can be tricky. But we don't have to worry about the fake news. I am worried about, because we've seen all the polls for my folks on the other side of the media space.
Right.
So people who are talking about news and talking about hard facts, we've already seen what that means. We know that nobody's watching local news anymore.
Right.
They're typically watching national news, which doesn't cover, everything happening in
Correct.
the
Correct.
and we are dealing with people who don't believe what is being told to them because they see, spin has always existed. There's nothing new. But I feel like now we see the spin.
Right.
And that's
You don't know what to make of it.
right.
Exactly.
I know that you're lying to me. Or I know that you are just wording this in a way to be nice. Or I know when you are evading a topic or question.
Right.
And you're still not giving me what I want. And what makes it even worse is that it shows up in our government sometimes. So
And we have certain publications and media that are just centralized on one subject and just centralized on the other, and they're opposing opinions. There's no real balance between what you're hearing and seeing. It's very polarized, and so it becomes difficult to assess what's true.
And we are more and more becoming a society that does not like education and doesn't value it.
Yes.
So we're not reading. What gets your attention is a headline.
Uh-huh.
Crazier the headline, the more you'll pay attention, but you still don't typically read it, or you go to maybe a shade room, or even the Washington Post, which is doing this really well. You're reading a bite-sized amount of information, but you're not nuanced. So there was something in the maybe it was on CNN about this guy who got monkeypox in Jamaica, and he was a tourist. And when he was hospitalized and found out he had monkeypox, instead of staying, he leaves the hospital and like, I want to enjoy my vacation, and he leaves. And that was the headline. So I reposted that and like, put like a little message like, guys, be careful. And somebody who lives there said the headline is misleading. That's really not what happened.
Okay. See?
Exactly. So, but that's what we love. We love the salaciousness. We are a culture that is really big on social media and really big on reality shows. So I think as Americans, we need to change the way we prepare ourselves and actually go out and take in media so that we'll be better informed. So Stephanie, I think you have left me. Uh-oh. And I turned off my phone, so I can't. She'll be back.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was like, what? Oh my God, what went wrong?
That's okay. It's okay. I got it.
So okay. All right, we just edit that part out. Thank God for not streaming live. Not streaming live. So we were talking about you received or you posted an article and someone said that wasn't how that happened.
Right. I think I don't know if they're going to keep it in, but what I was saying is that as Americans, we need to really take time to change the way we allow ourselves to be informed and start to make reading something that we actually like and do again, because that's where this all falls apart. Like had I read this, I probably would not have paid attention to the headline. And I've seen that plenty of times where you have this great headline and then you read the story and it's either a different story or it's a crappy story. It was so well written. You're like, wait, what?
Why did I look at that? Yeah.
But it's just, I think that's just, we like salaciousness. We like, reality television.
Yes.
We like social media, and that changes how we perceive things, and it changes how we take in information or why we won't take information.
Right. I think time too is a factor. And I think that's something we need to get at as part of our health and wellness. We talk a lot about health and wellness, but nobody talks about slowing down.
Right.
Well, reading forces you to slow down. You've got to stop, you've got to absorb, you've got to pay attention. So even if you do it just for the health and wellness aspect of it, it will force you to, like you say, really have all the information that you need to make really good decisions and decide if this is a good idea, this is good information or not. But you tapped on what we said. We were going to talk about right before we got started. We're a member of Black-Owned Media Alliance, BOMA. A subject matter came up with regards to, is this deemed a racist organization or the information that we're sharing is racist? I think you and I both believe that is not true. Let's talk a little bit about the need for Black-owned media organizations. Let's use this as a teachable moment.
Right.
Why is there a need? And also, what does this organization do that, so we're very clear about it. It's not about downing others. It's about uplifting us.
It's really about advocating for a group of publishers who publish news and information across all different platforms, but who need someone to go into the world to advocate for them. That's what we do. We advocate for each other. We remind the world that we exist. It's really unique if you look at South Florida. We have there's 17 of us in the organization, but there's actually more than that based here in South Florida, which is really unique because looking at Dade County alone, there's under 500,000 African half a million African Americans or people who identify as Black that live in Dade County. But we have over 17, probably close to 20, 25 publications that aim to speak at this particular community. And we receive less funding, we receive the least in advertising sales, but we have over 1 million readers per week on our platforms. So it's really just an organization that advocates for a group of publishers who may not get the same opportunities as non-Black media here in right now in South Florida. That's all we are. And when you talk about Black media, it's a company that's either because you can be Black owned, but not actually focus on a Black audience. That's one of it. Or you can be Black owned and talk to a Black audience, but it's really just talking to a niche. It's talking to a group of people who have certain values, certain buying habits, certain personalities, certain culture, and you speaking to that culture. Right. The same way you had Italian American newspapers, the same reason why you had Spanish language newspapers, it's a group of people who had a required needs. The same reason why you may love conservative media. Conservative media talks to people with a certain culture, certain lifestyle, certain way of viewing the world.
Certain beliefs, yeah.
That's it. It's nothing about being racist. And this came up, but I won't tell you where. I'll tell you about that offline.
Okay.
Because it's Black media doesn't mean that it's just for Black people.
Right.
I mean, we talk to a particular audience, but I would, highly suggest if you're not Black, that you make it a point to make Black media part of your reading list of everything that you do, so that you can learn about an audience that you may not have access to. Right. I don't mean you're maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 Black friends. And that's not even baby comment.
Right.
But I mean, just in reality, you're speaking to people that are probably like you because they have certain likes and culture as you, even though you may ethnically be different. But it gives you a chance to look into a whole world that's speaking about things that you wouldn't consider, that you wouldn't know about. Brands that you may not have access to are probably part of that. All types of conversations that are necessary to learning about the world that you don't necessarily have access to. Just because we say that we're Black owned or that we focus on Black doesn't mean so. And if you want a great example, look at Telfar. So I love Telfar bags. I think I have one. Why do I have one, but my kids have more than me? Oh my God. So my kids have Telfar bags. And I only got one bag.
Are you about to go take those bags away from those babies?
No, I'm going to buy myself a Telfar bag. Oh,
poor baby.
Anyway, okay, so look at Telfar. It just occurred to me. So look at Telfar, right? People who wear Telfar, it's a Black-owned brand, and it clearly identifies the Black-owned brand, in his models. But all types of people wear Telfar bags.
Exactly. White
men, Black men, white women, Black women, Hispanic men, Hispanic women, all have the Brooklyn Birkin. Right. They all love this bag. And even though it's clearly a bag by a Black man who all of his imagery uses Black bodies and very, very Black slang and Black speech, it's still something that people get into. And part of it is definitely because of a generation that maybe doesn't have the same boundaries that we did.
Right.
But also, I heard about Telfar before my kids hadn't told me about Telfar. I heard about Telfar in a forum for professional women who were looking for an everyday bag. And that's how Telfar came up. They were like, you should consider the Telfar bag because it's not leather. If it gets wet, you won't be upset, but it's still stylish.
Right.
So, those are things that you need to have conversations about. So it's really important to just take that in. When I was in high school, there was a magazine called Yoke. And I could never find it, but I always wanted to find it. It's no longer in publication. Mm-hmm. And Yoke was for Asian Americans.
Okay.
But I remember hearing about it, and it just looked cool. And I was like, man, if I ever see that, I'm going to pick up a copy of this.
Right.
I'm not Asian.
Right. Just look at there's some fashion in there you would wear too.
Right. Yeah, I'm mid-age, no Asian country. But I was still like, I really want to read this because I was interested in a different point of view and different information. So that's what I was thinking about. So I think that's important. And also, Black publications will give a chance to people who look like them, so that audience that looks like them will probably give them opportunities that they could not get at another mainstream publication, because it's just there's far less competition
Right.
but more opportunity.
Right.
So that's why all of these publications are important. If you think that the fact that there's a magazine called Knitting World,
Right.
if you
Exactly.
love to knit,
That's not racist or any
yeah.
connotation. That's just your interest level.
And if for people who keep saying, well, they don't talk about race, bam. So take race out of this conversation, because it's really about niche.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, it's about niche. It's not
Right.
even about race. It's not even about race. It's about niche. Like if you look at the beauty industry, there are plenty of Black women, and you see it. If you ever grew up in any urban city, there were always Black women who lived in the same urban neighborhoods, who went to your beauty salon, who got your same hairstyles and your same nail designs.
Right.
Right. So it's about niche, and it's not about race. I think that that's something that we need to kind of take out of the conversation.
I think sometimes those are, folks just throwing things out really either out of ignorance or just trying to poke a fight.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's I think on both sides of any spectrum, you've got to look at it from really what it is, because
Right.
Make things better if we don't.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about, in a $28 billion industry, we are, I mean, it's becoming a very highly competitive space. This, publication, media, information is becoming highly competitive, especially where you and I live. This sort of everybody sort of seems to be in this space. Talk to us about, you're clearly in a different niche, but how have you been able to really maneuver this competition space, this competitive space that we live in, and sort of rise to the top and continue to rise to the top?
That was actually really hard for me, because it has to go back to living behind this computer screen and not really getting out. So I remember, for example, when I met Dexter as something that BOMA was a sponsor on. And somebody had to kind of like slip me in. And Dexter didn't know who I was. That was his first time meeting me. But at that point, I've been around for a while in a lot of different spaces, but I've been in this art space. And he didn't know who I was. And it took me a long time to raise my voice and to be confident in it, because I really wasn't. So that took some time, and it took a lot of time for me to not pay attention to the competition, because I thought that maybe I wasn't good enough, or I didn't offer enough, because all these things that you think of when
imposter syndrome,
major imposter syndrome. Right. I battle that every day, right? So like living in my head all the time. It was meeting my audience, and I think taking myself out of it and like looking at everybody who was out there and realizing who I was and where I fit. I think that helped me in the confidence arena. But I think more importantly than that is that I'm always pushing to be good, and I have a high bar that I'm aiming for. I'm not there yet, but I know that because of where I'm aiming, I know that I have to provide something in particular. And I think that that's what has saved me from probably even giving this up.
Right.
And letting somebody else do it because of whatever reason. And I know that what
national. Are you sure? Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's why we don't just distribute here. The goal was never to be a local publication.
Okay.
That was never the dream for me. And not that should be the dream for everyone. I think that there should be like local conversations about everything, but that's just not what Sugarcane was ever supposed to be.
Right.
What makes me lucky is that I live somewhere where people come in from all over the world. So I get this, like, there's an argument that pops up every once in a while about me and covering national artists. And people don't ever understand what I mean by that. So at any point, you can go into any museum here in South Florida and you will see a lot of them are not from here.
Right.
They're not exhibiting, not that they don't, but most of them are not from here. They are from all over the world, which gives me access to people that if I lived in no man's land, Florida, that I would not have had access to. It would have been a lot more difficult. So,
Right.
those are people that I talk to. But the thing is that Betty Starr was at ICA during December. She was in our last issue. And so that's a big deal for people here. But a big deal for people everywhere because Betty Starr is well loved and well respected and well copied.
Right.
So,
Right.
that's somebody that, we would all talk to. And so those are the kind of conversations that I have to have. And I have to, if I'm going to have these conversations about Betty Starr, I can't have like a crappy writer do this. I have
Right. Right.
to have great photography. It has to be, great work.
Right.
So that's my aim. I have targets that I aim for, and I'm striving to be able to meet those metrics.
Okay.
So that's what keeps me focused on me and not competition. And I'm sure that at some point in my life, I really need to start doing that because, just like if you think about the fashion world, everybody loves puffy bags. I hate them. But everybody has a puffy bag because it became a trend. So everybody has like their own spin on the puffy bag, so those are things that I probably will need to think about.
Right.
And, on certain levels I will. But for the most part, no, I have metrics. I have a place that I'm trying to get to.
Right.
That's what keeps me focused.
I actually agree with you. Actually, I think you and I are very much aligned because when you try to get into other people's spaces, first of all, that's not who you are.
Right.
Second of all, you're spinning your wheels trying to do and replicate. Just do what you do well, and people will receive. Now, I like to ask working mothers this. You're a wife, you're a mother, you're an entrepreneur.
Yes.
I know your day has got to be the business. I think one time we had a meeting. It was so funny. We had a meeting when she was walking through the streets of New York and trying to give her report at the same time. We were like, "Where are you? You have a coat. What is going on?"
Yes.
So I can attest to her day is a little crazy. So how do you manage that, or are you still working on, balancing entrepreneur life, which could be is not necessarily always a 9-to-5 on off gig, and raising children who are about to go to college, and how does that work?
I have come to the conclusion that I cannot have it all.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell women that all the time. I was like, I know what we were told in the 80s. It was wrong. It was because you had a group of women who were moving into a life that they never had.
Mm-hmm.
Their parents didn't have, these big careers and had to raise kids and be a wife and deal with ailing parents. Right. This was all new to them as well. So you can't have it all.
Mm-hmm.
You can do the best you can. And that's what I try to do. That doesn't mean that every once in a while I try to make it work. But when I can't, I will stop and go, you know what, you can't do this. Pick one and run with it. And that's what I have to do.
So forgive yourself. Like, this is the moment where I've got to take some time to do this.
Yes. And, sometimes it is. I had something to really go to last night, but I promised my kids macaroni and cheese. And I really I was trying on some clothes, like, what can I wear? What can I wear? And I was like, you might be able to pull this off. And I finally was like, and you got to chop up onions and garlic. No.
Right. That's
you promised this baby macaroni and cheese. Go to the after party later. Go make this macaroni and cheese. That's what we're doing tonight. So, that's what it is. You have to decide what's important. Sometimes I won't answer an email right away because I'm making macaroni and cheese. And what I'll do is I'll kind of, before I send this out, let's think about this real quick.
Right.
I will do both as I cook and then go back and say, all right, this is what you want to touch on. We'll send this off in the morning. Okay. But I just make it work. I can't do it all. My kids come with me. That's why they say that they like going to galleries and museums. I don't think they always do. And though they love the arts, so I'm looking in that respect, but I know that part of it is the bribe of going to dinner later.
Right.
So one of the things I love about Pam is that at Pam, I'll go and we'll see a show, but I promise them dinner at the restaurant. So like we'll do that. I'll let them have dessert and like, you know, they're good, you're full. I'll buy them something from the gift shop and let's go.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. My mom, if it makes you feel any better, my mother was a hardworking woman too. But to watch her work and to watch her work ethic really was a reflection on me as I went, I wasn't always happy about being out. So 9 o'clock at night with my toys at home. However, in the long run, it did work very well. So feel better about that. Well, before we go, first of all, I want to again thank you for agreeing to do this. This has been a great information, and actually, as you're talking, like there are a lot of things that I feel like we align in that way. So I feel it better. Like, whoo, there's somebody else feeling that way too. So tell us, how can we find you?
You can find us on the World Wide Web. Remember we used to say that? The World Wide Web at sugarcanemag.com. You can also find us on Instagram, Sugarcane Magazine. I think across all social media, we're Sugarcane Magazine. That's where you can find us. And, you know, we'd love to have you, you know, follow us, get a subscription, sign up for the email, all that good stuff.
Okay. Thank you again. And you have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
So thank you everyone for joining us again here at Just Talking Business. Again, I am Stephanie Van Bark. I'm a small business owner, and we love it when you tune in to learn more about our businesses. Again, I always learn. I hope you do too, and I'll see you next time.